Hello guys, welcome to another video. Seraphim by Sakurademonalchemist. Katekyo Hitman Reborn. Highschool Chapter 4. Asia honestly thought she would be watching the fallout of the raiding game from wherever Graphia was. You could imagine her actual confusion realizing that 1. The game had already begun and the setting was the school, and that 2. She was now part of it. Asia turned to Rias. It took Rias several seconds to realize the problem. Wait, why is Asia with us? Asked Issei confused. I don't know, said Rias, just as confused. Asia face-palmed. How much do you want to bet the idiot thinks I'm your bishop? Wait, what were the full terms of the raiding game? Rias replayed the announcement of Riser Phoenix against the orc, and a smile appeared on her face. He only challenged my club, not my peerage, said Rias. Which means that if I can trick him into including me in this little spat, I can openly beat him for you and they won't be able to do a thing about it later. I have a way to deal with annoying tricks like instant regeneration. 0-point breakthrough was a ridiculously useful, if complicated and headache-inducing technique. It also was something that not even a phoenix would be able to melt through, particularly if she used the original version. So, does this mean we should scrap our plan? No, stick to the original plan. Riser can't hear us, right? Asked Asia. Rias shook her head. Then as long as he has no idea that he should focus on me and not on Rias as a threat, we have an almost guaranteed victory. Considering what I saw of his personality, he won't know how badly he screwed up until after this is over. Everyone nodded, as Asia had helped Rias to hammer out a decent plan from what little information she could come up with thanks to the video footage of Riser's previous wins. It was pretty obvious that someone had gone out of their way to ensure Riser's ego had grown out of control. While Issei and Kaneko went to draw out several of Riser's peerage into a trap, Rias decided to kill time by talking with Asia. Since Asia technically shouldn't even be part of the game, she would stick strictly to healing. Both to hide her identity as a neutral party and to further confuse Riser into thinking she was harmless. Issei would never think of his Nei-san as harmless ever again. Not only had the training camp firmly cemented this fact into his head, but after seeing the way Kaneko improved as both a fighter and as an ego crusher, he swore firmly never to royally piss Asia off. Kaneko's sarcastic barbs turned positively evil after Asia was done with her. Issei shuddered at the thought of Asia turning her worst on him. She would utterly wreck him without laying a hand on him. Worse, he had seen Akeno taking notes from Asia and having a look of utter respect on her face. Considering what he knew of her preferences, that terrified him for good reason. So Asia, you're adapting rather well to Japanese life, considering you were in Italy before, said Rias, trying to make small talk. I'm actually half Japanese, and my mother lives in Japan. If I had known what a hard on the church had for my sacred gear, I never would have left, said Asia. Wait, what? Said Rias, shocked. If your mother is Japanese, then why? Do you know the Vongol as external advisor? Asked Asia. I've heard of him, vaguely. Nothing that would inspire confidence though, said Rias. If I had remained with my mother, he would have convinced the Vongol Inono to seal my powers in an attempt to keep his civilian family out of the mafia. And to curry more favor with the Don, by taking his line out of the succession line while simultaneously keeping his daughter around for potential breeding purposes, said Asia simply. Wait, from what I've heard of flames, that would almost certainly kill you at a young age, said Rias. Under normal circumstances, it would. Except I have twilight healing, and that can be turned inward if necessary. When Reborn learned exactly what sealed Timoteo had used on his student the first time, he was astounded it hadn't killed her before puberty. The sheer amount of flames she contained forcibly restricted, combined with the fact it did nothing to sky attraction, should have at the very least cooked her internal organs, rendering her sterile for life. And yet, she had a clean bill of health. More to the point, she had minimal side effects to the desperation bullets he had shot her with so often, on top of his hellish training. Her healing factor was too strange, yet Amitsu's line was purely human. He had checked multiple sources. And then she showed him her trick, which hadn't been affected by the seal, and it all fell into place. Reborn had firmly made sure she never, ever showed to anyone outside her circle of trust, and then threatened a hellish death to anyone she told. Then he took her for an extra special training session and explored every avenue he could on how to use it without anyone finding out she had twilight healing. Which was when they found out the unique properties that occurred when combined with flames, and that lead to him contacting his father, who he preferred not to talk about. Asia would sometimes get a headache when remembering this, And all the annoyances she went through now that she knew why Reborn was so strict about hiding twilight healing. Or rather its true designation, twilight burning. Rias looked at her in disbelief at the pained expression on Asia's face, but unfortunately she hadn't thought to pack any booze. I don't want to know the details, do I? Let's just say that I'm going to do something rather complicated and almost certain to piss off Riser's family. Just let me handle the aftermath and you should be fine. Asia kept close to Rias, and they made their way to the roof where Riser was waiting. He sneered at Asia, and the way she kept healing Rias. What a weak bishop, he sneered. Asia was patient. Rias knew she would have to trick Riser into allowing Asia to join this particular game for their plan to work. Asia had been rather clear on that point. If Riser agreed that Asia was part of the deal, then she was legally allowed to kick his ass and reveal what a horrible idea that was. With a bit of goading and knowing his tastes, it was tragically easy as Riser happily divulged how thoroughly he'd deflower all the women of the Orc. Rias turned to Asia, who was behind the barrier. That enough? He made it clear he was only challenging the Occult Research Club, not your peerage, said Asia cheerfully. If I have your permission to fight? Oh, by all means, he's all yours, said Rias. As satisfying as it would have been to beat Riser with her powers, she wasn't stupid enough to challenge someone with instant regeneration with only half-assed training. Asia pulled out a pair of special gloves, specially made by Azazel, who was all too happy to supply her with new ways to handle Valley's ego back to him, and slipped them on. Argento Asia, treasurer of the Occult Research Club, ready for action president, said Asia. This was mostly to alert everyone what her rank was in the club. Reborn had trained her to cover all bases. Riser only knew something was off when he had to dodge a punch to the balls. He took to the air, realizing he was dealing with a martial artist. Only for his eyes to widen comically in shock as Asia's head lit up with a brilliant orange fire and her eyes turn amber. He stared at that in incomprehension before he realized what it was as Asia chased him into the sky. How? Devils can't use dying wolf flames, only, shouted Riser, dodging another punch. I never said Asia was my bishop, Rias cheerfully called out. You made it clear you were challenging my entire club, not just my peerage. That's cheating. Are you saying Graphia made a mistake? Said Asia cheerfully. Are you really daft enough to call the current Lucifer a cheat, considering he already dislikes you for how openly you're lusting after his sister and intend to defile her against her clear wishes? Riser paled even further, realizing he had been tricked, rather thoroughly at that. Still, she was only a human. And her sacred gear was a support type, so it wasn't like she was an actual threat, right? Oh, how he would regret this particular bit of stupidity for the rest of his life. Asia would shamelessly recite passages of the Bible or pray to the Lord whenever he attempted to launch fireballs, forcing him, and Rias, who was within earshot, to cringe and miss. And then he made the critical mistake of trying to fly towards the Orc clubhouse, which was acting as Rias' base. He really should have kept a better eye on the ex-nun, as the first and only indication he had of how badly he had screwed up was when the first touch of ice began to crawl against his arm. Against all odds and despite him attempting to ramp up his own fire to melt it. His look of shock and fear was particularly satisfying to Rias, as Riser was unceremoniously defeated by being turned into a rather ugly ice ornament. Winner. The Occult Research Club, announced Graphia. Rias sank deep into her couch, and just sat there. After all she had gone through and the fear of being married to that utter prick, it was finally over. Graphia had confirmed it by showing Rias the document, which had burned to ash the moment the judges declared her win legal. Riser's own stupidity had doomed him to defeat. More to the point, she had threatened to abdicate in favor of her nephew Milikas if her parents ever dared attempt to force her to marry another pure blood devil against her will again. Considering Searzex had cheerfully shown up and stated that he would be more than happy to dismantle the Gremory family until they got the hint to back off on the matter, the subject was firmly and permanently dropped. Seraphim, who had come to watch in support of Rias since she adored her like a second little sister, had chimed in that she would help. Besides, Rias was a cheerful co-conspirator for sisterly bonding with her little Sona, much to the other girl's dismay. Then she looked up and saw her brother there, feeling okay? How did Asia end up in that game anyway? Riser challenged the Orc, she was inside the clubhouse and a legitimate member. Besides, anyone of Vongola blood with actual combat training is a headache to fight, especially if they're competent. I figured it wouldn't hurt and when he legitimized her presence there he set himself up, said Searzex shrugging. Did they ever thaw him? Asked Rias seriously. Seraphim had a shit-eating grin on his face. Rias sat up with eager attention as she knew her brother had details that were going to make this day even better. Asia is currently arguing over the details of what the Phoenix family owes her to defrost their son. Last I checked it was to a rather sizable sum of cash, and that was just the start, said Seraphim. It was pointed out that since she wasn't part of your peerage, they can't force you or the Gremory family to make her defrost him. Oh, this I have to see, said Rias. Before she winced. Fighting Riser had been difficult. Grafia insisted on recording it. She's there right now, said Seraphim. Don't know why Asia asked for a recording of the game though. Rias didn't find out what exactly Asia got from the Phoenix family. Grafia was impressed and Asia was smug. But she did find out Riser was now terrified of sweet, innocent girls who looked utterly harmless and would now piss himself if anyone even mentioned the words, Asia, nun, or bishop. Coincidentally, when Azazel saw the rating game, he laughed his feathered ass off at the point when Riser gained his, oh shit, expression. Valley mentally swore to find someone who could handle Asia's stamina and hopefully get her laid before she got worse. He considered her a worthy rival, but was not stupid enough to do it himself. Regardless of how much Albion adored her, Asia thought it was nice that Seraphim took her personally to the familiar forest, especially since she walked out not only with a sprite dragon, but an odd tiger cub that reminded her of Xanxus's when he was acting like a total Sunera.